Can this Gemini IPO spark a wider wave of IPOs across the crypto space, or is Gemini just an outlier?
Well, I hope so. So the companies in the field have been maturing and hopefully at the same time as the IPO market is opening.
You, of course, are someone who has been in the Bitcoin space for years. Not to age anyone here, but at least a decade you've been playing in this field. Time and time again, we're seeing a broader adoption here. But is it all talk from a White House perspective? Is reality being struck from adoption at an institutional level?
We are seeing incredible adoption, and in 2025, there's great tailwinds to that. At the end of January, for example, Tether announced that it would launch on Bitcoin and on Bitcoin's payment network, Lightning, which means that trillions of dollars in activity and over 400 million Tether users could now be hosted on Bitcoin and Lightning Network. Those users in turn and Tether will get the value of Lightning's instant settlement and cheaper transaction capabilities.
So finally, with speed, with ease, maybe comes this broader adoption, but stablecoin regulation, is that necessary first really for us to see the wave of us all doing payments through crypto finally?
Regulatory clarity is certainly overdue and will be helpful. It's helpful both in terms of the startup ecosystem, and because the startup ecosystem is relevant to Bitcoin's adoption, it's helpful to Bitcoin itself as well.
Let's stick on this topic of regulation, as boring as it may be sometimes, but crypto at this point in its life cycle is still somewhat vulnerable to the whims of Washington. We've seen that really wax and wane. What can the administration do in the short term to really cement crypto's momentum?
Sure. So as I said, regulatory clarity will be helpful, but Bitcoin and startups don't exist in a silo. What happens in the economy is also incredibly important, and both to startups and to Bitcoin, and we've seen that in Bitcoin's recent volatility. Now, what we're hoping is that as regulatory clarity is available, that startups can continue along the path that they have pursued, but more efficiently, because their capital doesn't need to be spent in creating sort of redundancies and alternative paths that hedge against future regulation.
There's some common ground between crypto and artificial intelligence when it comes to data centers. This has been a huge topic in earnings for Microsoft and Amazon trying to build out the capacity to run their models. And not so dissimilar from Bitcoin, it takes a lot of energy consumption. And there's concerns that the power grid might not be able to handle this demand. Are you worried at all that perhaps these infrastructure constraints might impact Bitcoin's future growth?
That's a great question. So there is an important convergence between Bitcoin technologies and what's happening in generative AI and the proliferation of LLMs and apps built on top. Now, from an energy perspective, of course, Bitcoin has been very productive in providing anchor tenancy and mining off of renewable energy sources. Bitcoin can do that because it can scale up or down its mining demands based on the price of energy at the time, which makes it responsive to demand cycles. This Bitcoin mining can be applied to AI's energy needs as well in the way that I just explained. But Bitcoin technologies can do more than that because of Bitcoin's payment network, Lightning Network's ability to scale payments. As generative AI matures, it will need to access micropayments at scale on a reliable network, and Lightning, architected as a payment channel network, can uniquely do that in the cryptosphere.
We've only got a minute left. Lightning Labs is, of course, in your portfolio.
Yes.
Interestingly, Satoshi Energy is as well, and that's about renewable energy feeding Bitcoin miners. Where else is about to sort of take off when it comes to portfolios? Where other startups are you looking at?
Yes, so what's really taking off in 2025 is companies that are advancing the financialization of Bitcoin itself. So those are companies like, for example, a portfolio company, Kaza, that provides enterprise tools so that BTC can be added to the balance sheet. We've seen that happen in public companies. Bitwise recently reported that over 70 public companies hold Bitcoin. We're seeing the same sort of activity in the private market. That's facilitated by enterprise tools that allow for auditability and internal controls. that are otherwise standard.
Right.
We are also seeing products develop like Bitcoin-denominated life insurance. That's happening with our portfolio company Meanwhile, which allows for Bitcoin holders to mature their own portfolios so that they're represented with the Bitcoin ETF, holding Bitcoin directly, and with products to mature.